for bringing this up. Maybe you need to be offended at the actual system itself, because it actually requires that sort of suffering to be continued, just so things can carry on going. You know, if it's good for the human body, then it's not good for the economy, and vice versa.
I think as well, like, I think in there what you were talking about is beyond the profit motives context as well. It's saying Jesus in public.
Yeah.
Well, is that offensive or not offensive? Well,
it's okay if you put the word praise before it.
Well, this is it. Yeah, if you put the word praise before it, then it's okay. If you put the word twat after it is, and then a, and then twat after it, it's a problem.
You
know, for certain members of society. I always like Steve Hughes' thing on this. It's another barrier people have got to get past. You know, where he does that comedy sketch where he says, "Oh, I went to see the comedian last night, and he said something about the Lord, and I got offended. So
then I woke up and I had leprosy."
Yeah, and then I woke up and I had leprosy. Exactly. So be offended. Nothing happens. Yeah? You know, since when did sticks and stones may break my bones stop being relevant? Is basically this line in that. And it's absolutely true. You know, I tell you what, for wherever we may be going wrong and in the world, there are actually places where we have gone very, very right. And I think it's fantastic that even though we have police and various other authoritarian forces that would want to squash your right to speak through your megaphone as you do, Adam, and what have you, at least there's no trial without jury, and you don't just get taken down in the street 9 times out of 10. You know, I'm not saying things aren't degenerating and going in the wrong direction in that area, but it could be a shitload worse if you were in Saudi Arabia, dude.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so I think there's certain things that you can just say, yes, you've got that right, actually. And for all of the negative attributes of the world we live in, it's nice to be able to say, you know what, I hope we don't ever lose that. And the ability to question people and stand up for what's right is very, very important, even if the other person's view isn't palatable. Because then I suppose you have the opportunity of a dialogue and potentially changing some minds, which people like to think is impossible, but, you know, I would always remind them that we stuck Oscar Wilde in prison for being gay.
How ridiculous. I mean, one of the things that I say to people now is that, you know, when I engage people in, you know, what I prefer to be a discussion, sometimes they call it, oh, you know, but I don't want to debate with you, Adam. I'm like, well, neither do I. You know, personally, I made the realization recently that debating is about who is right. Discussion is about what is right. So
that's a very important. That's a very important thing, actually. I'm going to do a radio show on that soon.
Fantastic.
Called Parallel Thinking. Have you ever heard of it?
Can't say I have, no.
It was outlined in a book by Edward de Bono, which is The Six Thinking Hats.
Right.
It's largely for, the funny thing is, the book was largely written for business meetings, whereby meetings, you know, are usually quite inefficient, and they end up being a sort of argument-based thing, you know, right or wrong, like you're saying, like a debate, and an egotistical sort of parade as well. Whereas that's just one line of thinking. It's been good in a lot of senses, you know, the debate format, but it's not the only line of thinking. Sometimes you've got to do different lines of thinking, and what you do is you do them all together as a team. So everybody is forced at a certain level in that meeting to, right, now we are going to think creatively. There's no negativity, you know, now we're only going to think positively. Okay, now we're going to think negatively. What are the downsides? Let's go through them together. Now we're just going to deal with just the raw information. And so at different points, you gear the whole group towards things and you write them all out on the board, so that then you can arrive at the last thing, which is making a decision and weighing it up. And it's parallel thinking where the group are all on the same train of thought at the same time. Rather than this, what we do, which is I have this stated position, you have that. Let's see who's right. Like you just said, the form of the conversation model would be, let's work together to ascertain what's most right. I'll put my position down, you put your position down, and we'll see where we go.
Weigh up
see where we land.
And cons of
I think it's a much healthier thing. I've thought exactly the same thing. People go, oh, well, I'm going to enter this debate, or let's have a debate about it. And you don't have a debate about whether the world's flat.
Exactly.
It's not a debate. Yeah, basically that's where we've got to try and get to. One other thing I'd mention on that, actually, considering talking about living with this train of thought with potentially an awful lot of people who don't get where we're coming from, is one level you have to understand. People have a lot of emotional investment in an awful lot of areas.
Oh, absolutely.
In addition to ourselves included. I'm certainly not exempt from it. I catch myself behaving in certain ways, now and then. I can profit motivated. They're self-orientated. They're egotistical. There might even be me losing my temper or something, which must come from a certain reinforcement somewhere in my environment. So just because you've found this train of thought doesn't make you high and mighty or any better than anyone else.
Even though people claim that we are claiming it because because people ask me, do you think you know it all? I'm like, no.
No. Do you know what? What's really important with that is that we've got to understand that when you stand on the street corner with your placards out and your leaflets out and everything else, and you're shouting down a megaphone at people, or you're getting in conversations with people, and you've got your banners out, they just think you're either selling something or you're religious. Human beings have to take you and put you in a box that already exists in their associative memory.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why sometimes...
If it doesn't fit, then shit me. Well, it just must be a ghost. Yeah? Or something like that. Because that's what we do. The only thing that releases us from that is testing and the scientific method. We go, actually, we need to create a new box and put it in that. Due to the new facts we've encountered outside of our sensory organs. But that's another topic. And what I'm trying to drive at is that what people don't get with us is that the reason I stand on the street and hand out things is because of a lack of belief. People go, someone said to me once on a Facebook thread, they were like, I defend your right, you can believe what you want. I said, I believe in nothing. I don't believe in anything. Why are you talking about all this resource-based economy stuff? I said, because I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice. Literally, I am wearing clothes. I am talking to you because I've eaten in the last 3 or 4 days. I have clean air, which is helping me to have this conversation with you. I live in a house with central heating. I got here by a car, and all of these different things at one point or another have come through testing that something works, feedbacking it against the benchmark of physical, referent and natural law, and then repeating that action until new facts come along to say that we could do that particular function better. Now, I've seen all the evidence to see under a particular new model of doing things, which is tested against that benchmark, that there are ad infinitum amount of ways of doing all of those things better than we do now for human concern. I don't have a choice. How if I said, you know what, the resource-based economy sucks, do you know what I then have to do? I have to do this. I have to take off all of my clothes, go into the middle of the woods, and sit down by a tree, naked, alone, and praying.
Yep. Because otherwise, what have you got?
Exactly. If you say you don't like science, if you say you don't like evidence, and if you say you don't want to adhere to natural law of the planet that you live on and harmonize with those physically referented laws and govern your decision-making process for human society on those for our personal and social well-being, then I'm going to have to just say that personally I disagree, and if you disagree, then you need to get rid of your TV, your oven, your dishwashers, your house, your clothes, and everything that has been brought to you via that method so far, even though it hasn't been actually recognized by the governments of your social system. So you don't disagree. You don't disagree. And that's what really bugs me, is that I'm talking to people about this through a lack of belief.
And even though one thing I've noticed with people, they try and purport that what we're saying is actually beliefs, because they themselves recognize that beliefs are something that you personally have that cannot be proven. Beliefs are something, I believe in, I believe in fairies, or I believe in God, or, I believe this, I believe that, but it would harm their argument that they're trying to give if they were to say, that's your scientifically arrived conclusions. That would be like, okay, I'm arguing against, they can't say that, so they have to say, well, that's your belief. I immediately say to people, well, no, I don't orientate towards belief. Belief is something that we really, in this kind of context especially, need to move away from, because it's all well and good believing something, but if you try and put that belief into practice, then science is going to teach you that, something else is going to have to happen, because nature is what it is.
Yeah, and it's our understanding of it is obviously emergent. And that's essentially where our thought process has got to be going. There was something in music, actually. I had a musician friend of mine over, and we were discussing the language that we use to describe music. And for ages, I've been talking about how we've got these silly words for describing music, like quavers and crotchets and things. Why don't we just use the system of calling them eighth notes and quarter notes and things like that? And I've been talking to my students about this for ages, going, we should be using the more mathematical terminology. And this guy was saying, yeah, but if you do actually change the time signature, it's not really relevant to call an eighth note anymore, because you've suddenly got 9 of them in a bar.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, for now, the Latin words work better. How could you possibly call them eighth notes if you're in a different time? Well, then I suppose, yeah, so he kind of brought that up, and that updated me a little bit. I'm still in two minds about it, because I think it gets a bit more complicated. I think you can just say what time signature you're in, and then you get away with it. But it opened up the discussion a little bit,
Absolutely.
It's something I hadn't really considered before. And I've been going at this, but I appreciate the idea of being able to be updated. It takes a strength of character to be able to turn around and admit where you might have been mistaken. And that's what I like about Jacques Fresco from the Venus Project, is the first thing he ever asks anybody is, well, what's the problem with the Venus Project? I want to know where I'm wrong. You don't catch someone from a church saying that. So what's wrong with this Jesus thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing when we communicate and we face so many projections. I mean, even yesterday, I know looking back on it now, I know I shouldn't have been involved in it. But when it had finished, I realised this debate had gone on and off for about 8 hours. and it was, right, I mean, I'd engaged with this individual before, and I knew what he was like. I mean, he's like nearly 3 times my age, but when I start getting my points across concisely, he reverts to what I call the troll's toolbox. And I actually, like, as soon as he made the comment that I thought, right, it's on now, bitch, sort of thing, I immediately made a comment and said, right, just for any further readers, I apologise in advance for the troll fest that will now ensue. And I basically said exactly what he would do, and he did do it. But that's besides the point. The point is that that we face these projections that, oh no, you're just talking out your arse, and you're doing this, you're doing that, and we try and call them out for it. But it just gets to the point where we're starting to get frustrated, and we think to ourselves, wait a minute, let's actually look at this objectively. You're saying that I'm preaching at you by talking about a resource-based economy. Now, one thing that you haven't realized is that numerous times throughout this conversation, I've said to you that please, I would urge you to find this out for yourself. The worst